I think it is interesting the difference between working for a client versus working for yourself, because I think frequently we're so much harder on ourselves than we really need to be. And so on things like my website and my branding, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to choose colors that I like. I'm going to choose a font that I like, and I'm not going to be like too precious about it. And it's just going to look fine and not stress about it because I don't have time. I'd rather stress about other things.
In this episode of the Creative Debrief, I sit down with Rosie Fitzgerrel, who is a graphic designer and an artist, and she describes what it's like to be an artist and a graphic designer as well as a mother and how those things sort of coincide. She talks about how she decided to go into freelance work, and she talks about how she got into painting and some of her experiences with that. She has a lot of great advice for people who are thinking about either going into freelancing or people who are wanting to experiment with painting or drawing and what they can do to get the ball rolling on that. All right, everybody, I'm here with Rosie Fitzgerrel. Rosie, thanks for joining us today. Can you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, I am a graphic designer and artist based here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I've been doing graphic design stuff now for like 15 years, which is pretty crazy. The art side is new. That's like in the last 2 years, but I'm really enjoying it. And I work as a freelancer, and which that I've been doing for, that's kind of crazy to think about too. I've been freelancing for like 5 or 6 years now. Um, but Emily and I used to work together previously at True North, and that's how I got to know her. And she's so awesome and amazing, and so cool that you're doing this.
Thank you, Rosie. I feel like I should share with everyone who's listening that. So Rosie mentioned that we worked together, and Rosie was fabulous when we worked together. I think everyone who was on the team kind of idolized Rosie for her talent, and I think Rosie is still figuring this part out, but she's incredibly talented, and I just wanted to be able to have her share her expertise with everybody because every time we chatted about work, I always left the conversation more inspired, and everything that she
Oh,
did was just very, very inspiring. In fact, I remember one time I was like, Rosie, how did you decide or how did you make this spread so cool? And you were like, I just take risks. And I was like, yeah, but are you not nervous that your clients won't like it? And you're like, yeah, they can tell me. I just like to take risks. And so it inspired me to take more risks in my work. And so when I'm designing something and I feel stuck, I just remember what you said about take risks or taking risks. So anyway, as
yeah.
I said,
I know. I think it's good to take risks in design. I mean, obviously, so much of it is knowing and understanding your client. Um, but if you have a good repertoire with your client, I feel like, or your client is interested in trying something new, why not? Because having interesting design is way more awesome, I think, than having boring design. I mean, boring design does, it serves the purpose, but if you can get something that pulls people in and engages them, I mean, that's like part of our job, right? Making it the content really engaging and fun to look through or read through, and staying engaged that during the duration of whatever it is that you're, whether it's like a white paper or a website or whatever. Um, so yeah, be bold.
I love that. It reminds me so much of so Rosie and I worked together at I would say it's just a publishing company, and we design magazines for hospitals all across the
Which was so
nation. So
fun.
cool, so cool, such a great job to have. And in layout editorial design, you have to create entry points and keep the readers engaged because some of this stuff is longer format, so you have to figure out how to keep them in the story or in the content. And so I think that's where the challenge comes to being bold and thinking outside of the box. But you were so inspiring for that, and I will never forget, Rosie.
I love working with long format content like that because it is like a puzzle. It's like you have these pieces, you have these photos that are provided, or this content or copy that's provided. They want to use this quote or whatever. Like, how are you going to put that puzzle together? And that's super fun for me. I enjoy that more than like branding and stuff, because branding is a little bit more open ended, and this is sort of just like different ways that you can arrange the puzzle, which is fun.
Well, you are so right. Excuse me. I like to think of it as like every glass has a different shape. And so you can create a glass for 8 ounces of water in any shape, but it still has to hold 8 ounces of
Oh,
water, and you still have to be able to drink from it. But I like the analogy of a puzzle because it's so true. And layout design and editorial design is a very unique side of design. I'm a huge fan of it too. I also like all kinds of other design, but there's just something very special about getting to do editorial design.
but yeah, I do a lot of presentation decks now. I do a lot of deck design, which I've seen become more of a trend in our industry, like companies looking specifically for presentation designers, which I think is really interesting because those can be so time consuming. And so it's fascinating. But when you think about what, presentations or are being used for, to shareholders or to potential investors or that sort of thing, then you understand, like, okay, why it's worthwhile to spend so much time, or invest so much time into making it look nice and presentable. But I agree with you. I like all kinds of design.
Yeah.
They all like make me excited.
Right? Yeah. And I think your passion is very contagious. It's so funny that you bring up presentation design because I agree with that. I've seen a lot of things in the market about presentation designers, different types of presentations. I've talked to a few freelancers that are working on presentation projects, which is really cool. And I mean, I remember back in 2008 working on a PowerPoint template and being like, wow, this is terrible, but there's so many new and cool things that we can do with presentations, even just working in Keynote. It's really interesting.
I
But
have opinions about like Google Slides versus PowerPoint. Or do you remember when, what was that, Prezi? That
Mhm,
one thing where you could like zoom in and zoom out,
mhm.
and people were very into it, but honestly, it just makes me kind of sick now.
Maybe it was a gimmick at the time that
It was a
people
gimmick for
did.
sure.
Well, so I'm kind of curious about how you got into freelancing and when you were like, "Oh, okay, this feels like a good avenue for my career. Let me try this out." Or this is, was it intentional? Did you just kind of happen into it, or how did it start for you?
It was very much I happened into it. Let's see, I moved to Chattanooga from Providence, and when I moved here, in Providence, I was working for a small branding agency there. And so when I moved here, we shifted over to where I was like a contracted employee. Um, and I got pregnant. And then after I had my daughter, that's when I left that and started working at True North for a few years. And then shortly after I had my son, I was laid off at True North. So then it was sort of like I had I don't know, a midlife crisis, if you will, of sort of like, should I even do design? Should I do, like, I was thinking about becoming maybe like a registered dietitian because I was very into like health and wellness and nutrition and that sort of thing. So I investigated that. But I also, so I reached out to my former boss in Providence and just let him know that I was available for projects. And so he sent a few my way. And it was during that time I realized, like, I still really love design and I don't want to stop doing this. I don't want to become a registered dietitian, actually. And so he started sending me more projects. And then I, word of mouth networking. It's always very like nebulous,
Hmm.
like, how do you get freelance clients? And everyone says networking and you kind of brush it off, but it's true. That's the best way. It's just like word of mouth connections. um and then let's see, in 2020, I decided to homeschool my daughter, because the pandemic and homeschool kindergarten didn't sound awesome, and I'm like, I have the time, so why not? And that's when I started a new like full-time contract with a marketing agency out of North Carolina called Blue Door. And so that time was really crazy because I was doing homeschool during the day with my daughter, and we discovered some like neurodivergent stuff with her during that time as well. So that was very stressful. And then in the evenings after my 5 and 3-year-old were in bed, then I was up until 1 in the morning, working on design projects. So I was very tired for like a year. And it was so nice. The following year, we put my son into preschool, and I was like, "Oh, I could like work during the day. This is amazing." My daughter started first grade, um, and so then, yeah, since that time, I contracting through this marketing agency has sort of been my main like bread and butter. But I also take on other like local clients here, mostly like nonprofits. Um, so it's nice to have. There's a lot of stuff with a contract, a contract type position, elements that I don't have to worry about, like finding new clients or back and forth interaction or even like strategy stuff. But I get to do that with my own clients here. Um, and so, yeah, I have enjoyed it because it's allowed me a lot of flexibility. I work 4 days a week with the company that I contract with, and then I have Fridays off, which previously I used to like hang out with my son when he was in preschool, but now he's in first grade. And so now I use it to work on like my art painting business or other like freelance clients or, getting my oil change and cleaning up the house and that sort of thing.
The normal weekend weekend
Yes.
chores.
Yes. It does help it make it feel like I have a full weekend rather than, yeah, dedicating a day to not fun household chores.
So so you talked a little bit about your painting stuff and all of that. So tell me how you found painting and because
Oh my gosh, I love talking about painting. I'm
good.
so excited.
'Cause and, like, just as, like, to help set the stage for everybody, like, everyone who I know who knows you, we agree that you're an incredibly talented designer, and so I think whenever we discovered that you were dabbling in painting and that you're really good at it, none of us were surprised, but I think it's been very pleasing and enjoyable to watch you grow this side of, I don't know, your life, your career.
Yeah, well, and so that is one of the cool things about paint. Like one of the things that I love about painting is that it's something that my kids get to see. Like I have my easel, it's like next to our Lego table in our living room. I don't have like a painting studio. My desk is like next to our dining room table with my other painting stuff. And so they don't get to see any of my design work. They know I'm a designer. I go to their school for career day or whatever, and I talk about my job as a designer. But other than that, they don't really see the work that I'm delivering to clients. But with my painting, they get to see that, and they are so proud of me. And they'll tell their friends about me, or like if I'm sketching something, like while they're at the playground, they're like, "Oh, my mom is making something. Do you want to see what it is that she's drawing?" And I'm like, "Well, don't look. It's actually not good." But it is nice to be able to like to feel that pride from them and to be able to like share that sort of like full life aspect with them. And that there's more to being a mom than just like making your lunch every day or whatever. I'm proud of them, and they can like be proud of me for the stuff that I accomplished too. So anyway, I just wanted to start that because that's like my one of my favorite things
Yeah.
about it. I got it. I've always been interested in art, but it was something that like I never felt like I was good enough at, to justify buying, nicer art supplies or materials. I always had like a little sketchbook and like a pencil or a pen, and I would dabble and do like, the Inktober challenge that happens on October. I would do that, sporadically. I'm very impressed by people who can make it the full time period because I get like 10 days in and I'm like, all right, I'm done.
You're already burnt
Um,
out on it.
Yes. But I got a very like generous gift card for Christmas from the Blue Door, the company that I contract with. And I was like, well, I'm going to use some of this money for myself. And I had been watching YouTube videos. I love YouTube. I don't watch like Netflix or HBO or anything like that. I just watch YouTube videos. But I had been following a few different artists and they used gouache. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but I'm gonna buy myself a little like a nice set and some brushes and then just see what it is. And I didn't know like what I was doing at all. I think one of the first things I painted was like you know those draw in your style type challenges that you'll see on Instagram. Artists might post, you know, at a certain milestone, have some sort of not that there's always a contest attached to it, but sometimes there's a contest of like take my artwork and draw it the way that you would. And I'm like, well, I don't know what my style is. And so it was just sort of like evolved from there. There's a great podcast called the Creative Pep Talk podcast with Andy J Pizza, I think his name is. If you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend it.
I would
Um,
listen to it just because his name is so cool.
it is, yeah. He's an illustrator. He's written some books on like feelings, kids books on
Mhm.
feelings.
Mm.
Um, and has like a little illustration for each feeling, which is really cool. But um, yeah, he on one of his episodes he was talking about, you know, finding your style. And I remember one of the key things that he said that really resonated with me is just that like don't worry about it, basically. Like it's gonna your artwork is gonna come out of you the way that it's meant to come out of you. And you are an individual with unique life experiences and perspectives, and your artwork isn't gonna necessarily look like other people's artwork. And sure, like go ahead and explore and experiment and maybe try out different styles or look at artists that you admire and you can try that style out and then like adapt it to your own or whatever. And so that's what initially did I did is like I looked at artists I liked and I'm like, let me try this style. And then eventually my style at all does not look like the way that it started out in my sketchbooks. And you know, like 2021 or 2022, whenever that was. But there are you can see like the thread, I guess, of like where I started and like where I am now. And I'm sure it will continue to evolve as I grow as an artist. But it was just like this winter, like in February, I bought my first canvas because I have these little like artist goals each year where it's like, oh, I'm going to try this medium or I'm going to do the largest painting that I've ever done, you know, which is it's just like that. So this past year I was like, I'm gonna paint on canvas like for the first time and like be serious about it. Um, so I bought my first canvas and then I bought a new type of paint called Flash, which is a vinyl emulsion paint that not too many people have heard of. But again, it was one of those things I found on YouTube where it's like it's in between a gouache and then it's an acrylic where it dries really matte and flat and it lends itself I think illustrators and like advertisers used it in like the 70s 60s and 70s and so there was sort
Interesting.
of like that design thread that was interesting to me. It was originally created for painting opera and play sets actually. um,
Huh.
so anyway, when I painted my first big piece using this and it was like a match made in heaven. I'm like, this is the medium that I should be using. Like it meets all the criteria. It's really bright and colorful and it dries really quickly so I can layer the color in the way that I want. And so that's just been really fun, I guess, to go from like just a little over 2 years ago where I felt like I don't deserve to have like nice art materials. I'm not a good enough artist or whatever to be like, oh, I have, you know, paintings in jury art shows now and like being accepted into other places. And it's really cool. Um, yeah, that's
So,
my art journey.
so that's very cool. I think a lot of people, especially artists starting out, think, what do I have to bring to the table? I have something I love to do, but I don't know what I have to bring to the table. Nobody's gonna like this. How do I even make money off of this, because you hear the whole starving artist story over and over again. And this isn't your full-time job, right? You're a freelance graphic designer. So this is just a hobby that you have that you love, that you're seeing some success with, and which is not surprising because I think you're just naturally very, very talented. And so this is turning into the brag on Rosie video. But but yeah, I think it's interesting that starting out you were like, why would I spend money on something that I'm not sure that I'm even good at? But you've stuck with it, and I think found a little bit of a niche there that, I mean, you've established your style. I think for now, I mean, like you said, it changes and evolves, and it'll happen your whole life. But do you still feel like you struggle with the same type of imposter syndrome, or is it different type of imposter syndrome? Do you struggle with it at all, or what's it like for you right now?
It's different. So my like artist word of the year I decided was confidence, because I recognized that like last year I wasn't painting as much as I wanted to because I was scared. And I'm like, I don't know if I can execute this the way that I want. And now and I will say, let me say this. When I started painting, I was not able to execute things at the level that I wanted. Particularly portraits was something that I really wanted to figure out. And I bought a book on how to learn how to draw portraits. And that book was amazing because not only it helped me draw portraits, but it helped me like hone my eye for like everything. I bought a book on figurative drawing after that. And I was sort of, not that like I don't need it, but it was like, oh well, actually I kind of already have the basics, so I did like I didn't use that book at the same level that I used the portrait book.
So it must have been a good book. Do you remember the name of it?
It's called By the End of This Book You Will, let me look it up. By the End of This Book You Will Be Able to Draw Faces, I think,
Okay, cool.
by Jake Spicer.
Another cool name. We
I
so
know.
I might just be hungry.
Oh, you will be able to draw faces by the end of this book. That's what it is.
Okay, perfect. And we
It's
can.
excellent because it's like a workbook, so you can draw.
No.
There's like different exercises that you can draw in the book as you like move through it, and sometimes you're just drawing like a bunch of noses,
Mhm.
and sometimes you're learning like the bone structure of the face, or sometimes you're learning like about different lighting. It was that and James Gurney's book called Color and Light. That was also like really excellent. So I would highly recommend those. But yeah, I think yeah, anyone can be an everyone. I think everyone is an artist, honestly. Um, but I think we put so much pressure on art being like good, and what is the definition of good? Like, what is good to us? I mean, when I was in high school and college, I was severely depressed. Um, like wanted to end my life depressed, and so much of that was tied to, I thought my only value in the world was like being able to produce other things that people liked, being able to produce good art, or good work. And if I wasn't producing things at the level that I thought I should be, then I would get really down on myself.
Mm.
Um, and so I think I've realized, it's interesting because my daughter is neurodivergent. And so we've gone through like different therapies and stuff with her. And I've learned so much through her. I always say, like, she's my greatest teacher, um, because she challenges me in new ways. And I learn so many things through her. But it's like going through that with her, which is still, an ongoing journey. I learned so much about myself in the process, and I realized that all of that voice in my head that said, all of these horrible things, like you're not good enough, you have no value, you don't deserve to be here. Those are what we like to call sticky thoughts now.
Mm.
And sticky thoughts are just thoughts that they're not only hard to get rid of, but they're also telling the absolute worst lies about you. So
Mm.
it's not that you're ugly, it's that you're the ugliest human being on the entire planet. Or it's not that you're, bad at art, it's like you're the worst artist ever. You shouldn't even be an artist. And so I realized like those thoughts are not necessarily me,
Mhm.
and my value is not tied to the work that I produce. Um, and that if I'm connecting with anyone when I'm making art, then it's good and it's valuable. And I can only be connecting with myself while I'm making it. And that's enough. And so it's been like quite a journey. It's been interesting because I've just sort of like unearthed this in the last year of like how mentally what changed to be able enable me to do this. And yeah, the realization that I was like probably holding myself back a lot more than I should have been.
Mm.
And so yeah, I've just tried to like let that go this year and just like, you know what, I can make work and it might be bad sometimes and it might be good sometimes, but if I don't like sit down and make it, I don't know.
Mm. That is so deep. I mean, I'm processing that a ton. It's so deep. I'm so glad you shared that. Would you say that that also relates to your freelance work as well, your design work?
Um, what's interesting and something that I noticed during college, the way that our design program was set up was you would have studios for a quarter, and then the next quarter you would have an internship, and it would just rotate like that for 4 years, basically, through the summer. And I noticed that when I had studios, that's when I was really depressed. And when I had internships, that's when I was fine. And I think the difference is working for like a client, I'm able to like separate myself a little bit rather than um, working for myself. Now, that's not to say like if a client is unhappy with something, I am like really hard on myself about that. And I do just like this past week, I was working on a project and there's a lot of back and forth and things weren't going as smoothly as I had sort of anticipated them going. And so I spent so much time this week working on that project, just trying to like push through it basically. And like, it does stick on my brain still. It is hard to like shake that part of it. But I think it is interesting the difference between like, yeah, working for a client versus working for yourself, because I think frequently we're so much harder on ourselves than we really need to be. And so like on things like my website and my like branding, if you will, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to choose colors that I like. I'm going to choose a font that I like, and I'm not going to be like too precious about it. And it's just going to look fine and not stress about it, because I don't have time. I'd rather like stress about other things
Yeah, you don't
than website.
exactly. So this is just my opinion, but I think that it's easier to make those decisions after you've experienced a lot, you've gone through a lot. When you get further into your career and you have more experience, you have more wisdom and all that, it's easier to choose, to pick and choose and say, hey, I'm going to prioritize spending time on this. I'm not going to stress about this. I have all this other stuff going on. I think when you're younger, it's harder to cut through all the noise and, um, you just don't have the same amount of experience. So it's interesting you were talking about design and freelancing and being in the studio versus being in an internship. And I think something that I'm seeing as a common thread with freelancers is the isolation. And so even though you're not necessarily in a studio producing art, I think as a freelancer you do tend to be pretty isolated because oftentimes you're not working with a team of peers per se. You're working with your clients, and I mean sometimes there are peers involved. You have your network of fellow freelancers to lean on, but it's like when you and I worked together, we worked in a department of like 25 people, so we were constantly surrounded by peers who did the same thing, and that we could bounce ideas off of and get feedback from, and so you don't have that feedback loop from your peers. You have your client feedback, and sometimes you need to bounce ideas off the wall and stuff like that. And so what do you do to I guess cope with that or deal with it?
I know. I think that is one of the things that I miss the most, because it was so nice when we were working together and we're in an office. If I was stuck on something, I could just say like, "Hey Emily, I'm having trouble with this. Can you come just take a look at my screen when you get a moment, and see?" if you can help me get unstuck from this problem. And so um, that's, I still have like within the agency that I contract for, there is a creative director, so I can send stuff to him if I do get stuck. Um, but frequently I find like if I am really jammed up on something, I'm just, if I have time, if it's not due in like 20 minutes, I will just walk away and like, I'm going to go take the dogs for a walk or something like that, or take a little break, or, go eat a snack and just remove myself. And I mean, it's the same thing with painting, really. One of the, I think, I mean, obviously everybody paints differently, and some people can just like bang out something amazing in a couple hours. I cannot do that. I have to like, I have my easel set up in my living room, and I have it turned in a way where I can see it as I walk by. And as I'm like walking by, I'm like, okay, taking notes. Like, this area needs to be darker. Or, like, I need to bring this area out more. This shape isn't looking right, or whatever. And so I think having that distance is super helpful. And I've also noticed, like, you and I went to the AAF event the other night, and I think, this is something that we talked about a little bit, but I think we're seeing more of these like professional events popping up again after COVID, because there are so many people in our industry that are working hybrid or working remote, that they're lacking sort of that day-to-day connection and culture. And so being able to like talk to other people about like writing a proposal or a contract is really, really helpful. And just, yeah, having that community is great.
Mm. Yeah. So, and just to like expand on what you were saying, I think, well, for everybody else, we were discussing how we've noticed an upsurge in in-person events, and it feels like people are starting to figure out how to be cool with being in person again, I guess.
Like,
Like, we all
yes.
kinda got used to being at home, and we've rearranged our lives to accommodate that, and now it seems like people are starting to reconnect in real life again, which, it's great for the people who really do want that and need that, and, for the people who don't, I guess they still have the option of staying at home. But it's been, I think, this really slow evolution that we're seeing a lot more of, I think, in the last, like, I would say 6 months to a year. And I think it's been pretty exciting. So is there anything that you would say for someone who's thinking about getting into freelancing, or for someone who's like, yeah, I have this maybe like inclination to draw or paint, but they're like, I'm not ready to go for it, or I don't want to go for it, or they don't see the value in it. Is there anything that you would say to either of those groups of people?
Um, I would say tap into like your your internet community and your local community, because there's so many amazing resources. And I mean, the first part, we're designers, so like the first part's always research, right? And like we have to understand the problem and what are our barriers and the obstacles, and what things are we afraid of, what information are we lacking. um but I am also a person that will just like dive into something without all of the information. um and I'm okay with knowing that the first or second or fifth time that I do it, it's not going to be perfect or right, and that's okay. There are lots of amazing resources. Like, I think one of the more intimidating aspects is like a contract. How do you write a contract? Ooh, I have it right here. Hold on. Okay. I was recommended this book. Sorry, I don't know if it's going to appear backward, but it's the Handbook of Pricing and Ethical Guidelines for graphic. It's the Graphic Artist Handbook. And so in here are sample contracts for all kinds of things, like retainer or website design or selling your illustration to a publication. And also just like lots of, I don't know, interesting like quandaries that you might encounter um, as you start or even like get deeper into this journey. So having books and tools and resources like that are super important. Also, as one thing that I did this year on the art side is I decided to like invest in that community aspect of, because I that's what I was really lacking, was an artist community. And so I joined something called the Thrive Together Network, which is an online network of all female and non-binary artists. Um, and that has been amazing because it's really pushed me to do things that I wouldn't have done otherwise. And like organizing my first group show, which was incredible, a great experience. And so I would say, yeah, look, research different communities that you can get involved at, because there are people there with tons of experience and so much knowledge, and they will push you, I think, out of your comfort zone, um, to do things that you didn't think that you were capable of doing.
Hmm. So I think what you're saying is don't be intimidated, do some research, and then get connected.
Yeah, but don't do too much research, because otherwise you'll end up in analysis paralysis. So just do enough to like get started, and then like don't overthink it.
Like maybe click on the link to the book that's going to be listed in the description below this video.
Yes, yeah, do that. Do that.
Okay, cool. Well, why don't you tell us what you're working on specifically right now, how they can find you, how they can find your prints of your work.
Oh, I have a website. It's rosiefitzgerrel.com. My last name is weird, so just check the spelling on that if you're looking me up. But if you spell my last name correctly, you will find me. I have a shop. I worked with a local printer to create some limited edition prints of two of my paintings, so you could buy those if you wanted. I have a painting, if you're local to Chattanooga, I have a painting at the AVA Gallery on Fraser Avenue. That's part of their juried member show right now. That's up until September. And then right now I'm working on a painting that I need to deliver in like 10 days to the Good Look Gallery, which is close to Odd Story Brewing, if you're familiar with that area. And that it was a group show that starts at the end of August, which is a female only group show. And then, yeah, I also, design work is also on my website. So if you want to peruse that and you need help with something, you can reach out to me.
Definitely call Rosie. Okay, so I'll link all this stuff down below so that you can find Rosie and you don't have to worry about spelling her last name correctly. And Rosie, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting. Pleasure. Did I say it right? Yeah. Pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing your advice and your experiences with us. It's much appreciated. I'm glad we got to spend some time together.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. This is fun.